Let's go down to the bottom. Amri the Beir of Sheila. 4 lines from the bottom. Amri the Beir of Sheila was taught in the yeshiva of Reb Sheila. Vatika, the flour dish. I know exactly what it's like. Some sort of dish. It's made with flour. So shari, this is permissible. But Tanya Vatika, so we have another brayso that says Vatika is
I'm not sure. I can't hear anything.
Oh, that's a problem. 1 second. Naftali, can you hear me?
Yeah, we need to send a message to Chaim. It seems that the problem might be at his end.
I still can't hear.
You're coming through fine. I'll send him a note.
Okay. You with us? Chaim, is it any better?
No,
Not really.
You're broadcasting okay today, Ellie.
Okay.
Chaim, the problem may be at your end because I'm hearing it fine.
Okay.
What's the problem?
It may, I don't know, if Naftali is hearing, then it's probably over here, the microphone is probably okay. I can hear you.
Yes, I'm hearing fine also, so.
You're hearing fine? Chaim, adjust some sort of something on yours, the volume of some sort. Okay. Let's see, play with it while I speak, and then that way you'll be able to see if it's working. Okay, so again, I'm in the Beir of Sheila, Vatika and Shari. The yeshiva of Reb Sheila said that Vatika is permissible to eat. It's a dish of flour. And we have another brayso about Tanya Vatika Aser. The other brayso says that this flour stew of some sort is prohibited on Pesach. When it says like kasha, depends how it was prepared. I know there's flour in it. Question is, did you use fruit juices and salt? Mishcha really means oil, but we're going to consider that fruit juices and salt. This other one, you used water and salt. The water is makes it chametz. May peiros don't necessarily make it chametz. Okay. Amar Marzucha says, what limchi means is different interpretations. Rashi learns that you're putting, Marzucha is saying that you can't thicken a stew or a soup of some sort with flour, even though the flour was roasted already. Now, roasted flour could be, it's already roasted, it's not going to become chametz. Maybe it wasn't roasted well, and it's going to become chametz. Here we're starting to hear the gebraks, the shilas coming up. Maybe there was a little bit in there that wasn't. Chaim, are we okay? Does it sound any better?
No, it's not so good.
Yes, it's working fine.
There's
there's
a reverberation that's coming on now.
Oh. So
yesterday was 2 days ago in the car was great.
Yeah, I'm not going back though. Yeah, let me try this. Let's see. Hear a replay. It should be okay. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you well. I mean,
perfect. Okay. So Avram Nassan here is sitting across from me. He says he hears me fine. So Amar Rabbi Yosef, we're on the bottom of Lamed Tes. Rabbi Yosef says, don't scald. That's pour hot water person shouldn't pour hot water over two pieces of wheat, two little kernels of wheat together. Maybe one of the pieces of wheat is going to be in the groove, this crack that's in the wheat. Then the flow of the water, dikula demaya really means the column of the water. A decal is a palm tree, but it means the heat of the column of the water won't touch all sides of the wheat at the same time, and not at the same time, won't touch all sides of the wheat. And because it's covered over by the other wheat that's right next to it. And then it could become chametz. This is crazy. When you want to do chalita, you're going to have to do mamish grain by grain. It'll be, people say, oh, I'm going to become Sephardic. I'm going to have rice on Pesach. And then you tell them you have to check the rice grain by grain. Forget it. I'll stay Ashkenazi. So here, they're going to have the wheat, but they're going to do chalita. They have to mamish do grain by grain. Every grain you have to pour it. Amar Abaya, don't roast two, the shibulias, the stalks. Don't roast two stalks together. What's going to happen when you roast it is it dries it out. It means the liquid is going to drip out of it. So if you roast two together, the liquid may drip out of one and go into the other stalk and cause the other stalk to become chametz. Who's saying this? Abaya. Amalei Rava. Rava says to him, once you're going to get strict like that, then you can't even roast one grain, one stalk of wheat. Maybe the water is going to drip out from this end and it's going to get absorbed in the other end. It's going to become chametz. Elam Rava, rather Rava says, you have no concern about the water, the moisture that drips out of wheat when you're roasting it. That liquid is called mei peris. It's fruit juices, and mei peris and machmitzin. Fruit juices don't cause chametz if they're strictly fruit juice. V'hadar bei Abaya me'ahi. Abaya retracted from that chumrah. The kol agav medalayu lei machmitzin. Notice he didn't accept Rava's statement that it's mei peris. He says you're right about that. Why? Because while it's dripping, it's not going to cause chametz. Damar Abaya says, "Hai chatzva da vishna." This jug that's roasted, which means that it's roasted. They use it for roasting grains inside this jug. Sachifa shari. If you turn it upside down, I guess that would mean that they would roast the grains underneath it. Then that's mutter. It may not mean totally upside down. It means just that the spout is facing downwards so the liquid can drip out. Then that's permissible. But zakifa, then if it's standing up, then it's usher. Why? Because it gets absorbed into the jug. Now what's happening here, what are we seeing from Abaya is that while it's dripping, it's not a problem. It can't be it's totally upside down. It also wouldn't be any chiddush that it's mutter. It must be that it's sideways and the spout is facing downwards. So while it's dripping, it doesn't absorb. And so too with the grains, the two stalks of grain, while it's dripping out, it doesn't absorb and it won't make it chametz. Rava says, I feel as a kifa nami shari, even if it's standing up, it's also permissible, even if the jug is standing upright and you're roasting it from underneath the jug. Why? Because mei peris and machmitzin. So there's a machlekes here, Abaya and Rava. Both of them are going to hold that there's a way of doing this permissible. But Rava says that it's always permissible because you don't have a liquid here that creates chametz. And Abaya says you do, you just have to do it in a different way. Okay. We have a big sugya here about soaking grains. The soaking grains was part of the process of getting the chaff off. So it makes it much easier if you soak it. but there's a chametz issue. It says like this: Tana Rabbanan ein loisesin sa'irim b'Pesach. You can't soak barley in Pesach. B'mlasis, but if you did soak them, then nispaku asiris. If they burst open, they sprout. Grain, yeah, perfect grain is fine. Clean, not wet grain is. We wouldn't do it. We wouldn't have a bag of flour or something, or a bag of grain to sell it. Yeah, we have buckets in the house of grain because my wife grinds the flour, so we put it away for Pesach. So why? I guess because maybe a little water got in there. We don't watch it like so carefully. So if nispaku, if they burst open, that's already chametz. Like nispaku, if they didn't burst, what would that be called? If it bursts, if it's it sprouts. It begins to swells, but it swells that till it cracks. So then mutaris, then it's permissible. If it didn't swell, if it didn't crack, then it's permissible. Rabbi Yossi says, Sheirin b'chametz. I have a solution. If they cracked, then what you can do is you can put it into chametz, not chametz, into chametz, into vinegar, and v'chametz same sun, and the vinegar shrinks it, so you get it back into its original state. I don't think what he means is that. Yeah, you can use vinegar on Pesach. It must be that there's a concern that it's beginning to become chametz, and the vinegar would stop the process. So it's not that it becomes chametz and then you just add vinegar and then it becomes kosherized, but it shrinks it so that it won't become chametz. Amar Shmuel says ein halachik Rabbi Yossi. That's not, we don't go like that. Rabbi Yossi is Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. He's a Tana. He's a student of Rabbi Akiva. Shmuel is an Amir in Bavel, in Nardai. Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Marukva. Rav Chisda says the name of Marukva, Leinispaku Mamish. Doesn't mean that it actually burst open. Even if it would burst because of the moisture, here it's talking about that you're putting it on a barrel of wine, and from the moisture or the smell of the wine, it would swell up. It's already chametz if it would swell. Shmuel says no. The only issue is if it actually burst, not if it would. Avad Shmuel of the Bedura, the Bay Bar Chashu. Shmuel actually was lenient in this village of Bar Chashu, in this area, and he said that it was permissible. Ispaku mamish. He said that only if it's totally burst, if it totally swelled in a way that it cracked open, that's when it's going to be usher. But if not, and that's what happened, it didn't swell all the way. So then Shmuel said it's permissible. Amar Rabba bal nefesh le'yiltes. Rabba says that a bal nefesh, Rashi translates a bal nefesh as a chassid. A chassid, it says on the side, he's Yerish Shemayim Acharid al Nafshay. He's worried about his soul. Such a person should not soak grains. Ma Yeri Bal Nefesh, Afilu Kul Al Manami. What are you saying? A Bal Nefesh, a Chassid. Chassid doesn't do that. No one should do it. The Tanya in license and B'Pesach. We have a brisa that says you're not allowed to. Doesn't have to do with Chassid. Pachi Kamar. This is what it means. Bal Nefesh, someone that's concerned about his soul. Afilu Chitin the Shrir LeYiltes. Even wheat you shouldn't soak. We only learned about barley. Barley is softer. Wheat is harder. Sharer is hard. It's the wheat. The wheat kernels are harder. Yeah, kosher. It's strong. I'm sorry. When it softens the chaff, you're able to get the chaff off. The husk. He's soaking the grains because he wants to make fine flour. So if he can separate that, he's gonna make some nice dishes, some matzah, something. Okay. So a bal nefesh won't even soak wheat, but barley seems to be also. Yeah. When someone wrote to the Rebbe, said, I would become a chassid, but I don't want to be because I'm afraid of what the Gra wrote. What the Gra says, wrote against chassidim. There was a chayrim. I'm worried about that. So the Rebbe said that if you go on the street and you ask someone what's a chassid, they're going to say a very religious Jew, ultra religious Jew. They said the Gra was concerned that the chassidim were going to be not religious. But today you see that the Chassidim are more religious. So they said if you're really concerned about the Gra, if you want to follow the Gra, you should become a Chassid. Okay. I think I read it in a letter. I read it in one of the English letters. Amalei Rav Nachman says, Man de tzayis leila abba achal namadi pusha. If you're going to follow Rabbah, where Rabbah says that a bal nefesh shouldn't even soak wheat, then you're going to have moldy bread on Pesach. Why? Because you're going to need, I don't know if he means mamish moldy, but he means that it's going to be like a lower quality of bread because you're not going to be able to get the chaff off. You're not going to soak it. You're going to have the Bei Rav Huna lassi. And not only that, Rav Huna would soak it. Rav Avin lassi. Rav Avin would soak it. The house of Rav Avin would soak it. The house of Rav Huna would soak the grains. It's not a problem. You don't have to follow Rav Huna. You don't have to eat that lesser quality on Pesach. Rav Amar, Rav says, "Asa liltes." Says it's asa. Sounds like he's even more strict than Rabbah. Rabbah just said a bal nefesh. 1 second. According to Rava, what do you do with that price? That price only told us that barley was usher. Sounds like wheat is mutter. The Gemara says, "Laimi ba'i kamar." The svar is exactly the opposite. Not only is wheat usher, but barley is also usher. Laimi ba'i chitin kiven despeit tzirei ailabu maya. On the kernel of wheat, there's a little groove. The water could get into that. So wheat, for sure, you're not allowed to soak. But barley, that's more smooth. It's round, and so there's no water that's going to get in. Maybe that you are allowed to soak. Avalsari, the shia, that's smooth. Ema shaferdam, you say that it's acceptable. Kamash malan, that barley is also aser. Wheat is for sure aser. Before we had the svar exactly the opposite. We said wheat is harder, so it won't have enough. The water won't have enough. Here we're saying that wheat has this groove in it, so it's going to swell. Hadamar Rava, then Rava said, you see, Rava was the strictest of you. He said, barley and wheat is usher to soak. Now Rava says, mutaliltes, you're allowed to. Rava retracted, he said, you're allowed to soak. The Tanya, Yetzim Pasnakia Vajra, we had before a Brisa or a Mishnah that said you're allowed to, you can be Yetzim Matzah with clean flour, and Hadra was actually the opposite, I think. What was Hadra? Hadra was like a black bread or something. But you can use pasnikia. If you can use pasnikia, clean bread, clean flour, it's impossible to have clean flour if you didn't soak it to get off the chaff. So you see that you're able to soak flour for Pesach. How did he get it clean? He didn't soak it. Rav Papa Rava. Rav Papa is a student of Rava. He asks Rava a question. Flour, kemach and silas, the flowers of a non-Jew in the villages are tahar. However, if it's in the cities, then it's tameh. The logic goes like this. In the villages, they weren't so careful with the cleanliness. The farmers, whatever, they had the darker bread. In the cities, they wanted the pastry, the more white flour. So probably the brand, yeah.
So what you see in the stores, that fine flour, is that carefully removed? Is it wheat berries or barley?
I think there's two parts to it. I think there's the part that's outside, and then inside itself, I think there's another piece of bran that they take out the whole wheat. I don't think whole wheat means this outer part.
That's the shell.
The outer part is the shell, the husk, yeah.
And bran
Is in the inside, yeah. They're removing the white flour. They're removing something on the inside, not just that they remove after I think they pound it or something. They can remove it. So here, what are we seeing? That in the villages, it would have this husk was still on the grains. And why was it on there? Because they weren't so careful. They didn't care. They weren't so finicky. So that meant they didn't soak it. They didn't soak it, then it was never wet. The only thing that could become tummy is something that became wet. So in the cities, then the flour was soaked, it became wet, so it's tummy. But in the villages, it's tahar because it wasn't soaked. But what we're seeing here is my time. What's the reason? Lamishim delaylasti, because it wasn't soaked. Bekakarelus silas, and you still call it flour. You still call it silas is a fine flour. Kemach is a coarse flour. You still call it a fine flour. The Gemara says tirgama kimcha. Just translate that it's only referring to the coarse flour. So that way, the fact that we said before that your yaitze bepas nekia, the pas nekia is talking about that you're actually allowed to soak it. Comes along Rav Papa and says that you can get fine flour without soaking it. Maybe you're really not allowed to soak it. We have a proof from Pas Shel Nachrim or Svasi Shel Nachrim, the flour of non-Jews in the villages is still called flour, even though it wasn't soaked. It says no, it's not true. It was soaked. It says that it's tahar. Yeah, that's only the coarse flour was tahar. Basa Denafik, after Rava left, so Rava gave an answer to the Rav Papa's question. So Amar Rav Papa says, my time malay, I should have said something else. I should have told him a different question. Mihad Amar Rab Zeira, Amar Rab Yirmiyah, Amar Shmuel. Rab Zeira, Rabba Bar Yirmiyah, says in the name of Rab Yirmiyah and the name of Shmuel, Chitin shel menachas ein leisis in neisam. The wheat of carbon mincha, you're not allowed to soak. And that's called silas. That's a strong question. How do you get, according to Rava, the fact that you can have white flour for matzah means that you soak the grains. And the Mishnah clearly says you can have clean flour for the white flour for matzah. That you soak the grain on Pesach. So obviously you're allowed to soak. So Rav Papa's coming in with these statements that are saying that I have other white flour and it says clearly that I can't soak it. So the fact that you say that you can have clean flour in Pesach is not a proof that you're allowed to soak it, because it's possible to do it otherwise. And he's bringing proofs not from farmers or people that do the flour. He's bringing proofs from Brises and Mishnayos that say that you're not allowed to soak these grains, and nevertheless it's considered white flour. Hadar Rava, then Rava then says mitzvah liltais. First he said it's aser, then he said it's mutter. Now he's saying it's a mitzvah too. Shenemar shmartim es matzis, because it says you should guard the matzis. Okay, how does that prove anything? If you're not soaking the grains, then what are you guarding from? It must be that you're soaking it, and that's why you have to guard it. The Gemara says, Ishi medalisha. If you didn't guard it until you added the water into the flour, to the kneading, lisha is the kneading. Shima delisha lav shimo. then just to start watching it from the kneading is not watching. Who knows what happened beforehand? So that's impossible. It says you should guard it. It can't be that you started at the end. Yeah, I started guarding it at the kneading. Rav Huna says that dough of a non-Jew, you're allowed to eat them on Pesach if you're able to tell that it didn't become chametz because there's no cracks in the dough. As it starts to rise, you start to see lines. The Mishnah speaks about what type of lines on the top of the dough is considered that it's the chametz started to become chametz. You're allowed to eat these, but at the end of the seder, you have to have a kazayas of matzah shmura. That wasn't matzah shmura. There's a special. It has to be watched l'shma. You have to watch it for the mitzvah. So, but you're allowed to eat it. What does that mean? At the end of the seder, you need to have a kazayas. It has to be shimar l'shem matzah. Ba'achreina in. At the end of the seder, you need the special matzah. Yes, for rishayin aloi, but at the beginning you don't need. That means that you got the dough from the non-Jew. Why didn't you start the shimur when you got the dough? If you can start from the kneading. My time, it's because you didn't watch it from from earlier than the kneading. You see, watching it from the kneading is not enough. The Gemara says, why don't you just watch it from the baking? Obviously, you need to watch it back from the liltais, from the soaking of the grain, and that wasn't in front of you. It's the non-Jew's dough. He did all of that soaking. You didn't watch it from them. You're not yet to the mitzvah of shmura. So shmura you have to start guarding it already from the time of the soaking of the grain. Rav is proving that it's a mitzvah to soak the grain. The mitzvah of shmura is a mitzvah to soak the grain and make sure that it doesn't become chametz then, and to guard it for the matzah's mitzvah. The Gemara says, "Mimai, how do you know this?" This is not a proof. Maybe you weren't there at the time of the kneading. You bought dough. You got the dough from him, and you weren't there. But maybe at the time that it goes into a situation where it needs to be guarded, which is here, and we're referring to the kneading of it. It would have been okay. Maybe the watching it by the kneading would have been acceptable. How do you know there's a mitzvah to soak it and then do the guarding over there? And you bring a proof from buying dough from a non-Jew, and you're saying that you can't use it for the matzah because that's not considered shimur. Maybe it just happens to be you weren't there, but if you were there at the time of the kneading, it would have been acceptable, and you don't have to soak it. When it says Rava didn't change his mind because of this. He told the people that are tying the bundles of wheat, when you're tying the bundles, you should already have intention that it's for the mitzvah. Must mean that Rava holds that you have to have shimur, you have to guard it already from the very, very beginning till the end. Okay, now there's a discussion here when it says Rava didn't retract. What he didn't retract from. Rashi on the bottom line says, "Afilu hachid layashkach Rava siyata lemilse layhadarei mimayda amar beinan shimur kaidem lisha." He didn't say that it's a mitzvah. Could be he did retract from that. It's this concept of a mitzvah to soak it. That we're not seeing. Rashi's just saying that you need to guard it before the kneading. Do you have to soak it also? That's not necessarily so. Before Rava said you do, and Rava didn't change his mind. But it doesn't mean, well, Rava had 3 stages over here. First he said it's prohibited. Then he said you're allowed to. Then he said it's a mitzvah. Rava didn't retract. Now, he doesn't change his mind. Now, which one? So you're definitely allowed to soak. But does he say that it's a mitzvah to soak? And you need the guarding from before the kneading. So yes, you need the guarding before the kneading. Is it a mitzvah to soak? Not necessarily.
Question.
Yeah.
The physical reality of what's going on here. At what point in the process is the soaking occurring?
Yeah, I think it's just you take the grains out of the husk, right? You have just these kernels, and I think they would soak them to get rid of some sort of shell that's on each grain. That's my understanding of it.
So it's what we would what's today is called whole grain. That's what.
And I'm not sure. That I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It could be our grains are already, when we buy the grain, it could be it's already off. I wonder if, when we have the white flour, I wonder if that's considered their white flour back then. I think their white flour was probably our whole wheat flour. I don't know if they did that second processing. I don't know.
So you're saying there's something in between the husk and the kernel itself.
Right.
I didn't know that. Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure. I have to look this up. It reminds me of when we learned smicha. We were bachrim. We never worked in the kitchen.
Right.
They were telling us things about, and then when we did treifus, we didn't know anything. So we didn't know the treifus is which parts of the animal have a. Okay. We learned it all like, yeah, well, if, theoretically, and we didn't take it apart. Okay. Mar Braid Ravina, Mar, the son of Ravina, Man Ketala Amy Ba'arba. I think this means that his mother would take wheat and put it in a trough from right away at the beginning of the season to start doing shimer for him to guard the grain. Okay. Hahu Arba, the Chiti. There was a boat of wheat. The Tava Bechishta. The boat sunk in a river. The river was called Chishta. Shaya Rava is Vunilanachim. Rava said you can sell this grain to non-Jews. Esvei Rabba Bar Levoy Rava. Rava Bar Levoy. Someone asks Rava a question. Beged Shabbat Bekalayim. If you have a garment that's made out of wool or linen, and somewhere in the garment is a piece of the opposite type, wool or linen, and it's lost, you can't find it. So there's a prohibition here. It's clear. It's not something visible. That there's it's the collar or something. It is, you know that it's there. You can't sell it to a non-Jew, and you can't make it for some sort of saddle for the donkey. But you can use it for the shrouds, for the clothing for a corpse that he's buried in. Now, what the Gemara says like this: Lenachri, my time alone. Why can't you sell it to a guy? What's the problem with it? It's shatnez. A guy's allowed to wear shatnez. It says La Misham Dahadar Maspel Yisrael, because the guy's going to say, "Oh, this is acceptable. I bought it from so and so. He's a very religious man, so you can for sure you can trust him, right? So he might sell it back. So there's a problem here. Why are you allowed to sell this grain to a non-Jew? What's a non-Jew going to say in the Jewish market? He's going to say, I bought it from this religious man, and it's for sure kosher. So Hadam Rava then said, Lizvinu kava kava Yisrael. You should actually sell small amounts to Jews. don't sell a Jew more than a certain amount. Just sell him small amounts that for sure he's going to finish before Pesach. That he'll be able to finish before Pesach. Just sell it in small amounts, just like that, with a expiration date. Right. Tana Rabbanan. Taught in a brisa. Ein moilin as a kader b'pesach. Moilin means to stir flour into the pot. Can't stir flour into a pot on Pesach. Sounds obvious. However, someone that does want to do that, he could put in the flour and afterwards he adds vinegar. We said that somehow the vinegar will stop the chametz from taking place. It would stop the leavening. It cooks it very quick. So the leavening is from the yeast, and maybe the vinegar kills the yeast. Is that possible? Okay. Some say you could do it the other way. You can put the vinegar in. The problem is that there's a stew in the pot. If you put the vinegar in, it gets immediately diluted. But some say that you can add the vinegar first and then add the flour, even though it's getting diluted as when you add the vinegar. Man Yeshaimrim. Who is this Yeshaimrim that has this lenient opinion that you can add the vinegar first? Rav Chizda, Rabbi Yehudi. It's Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanan. Rabbi Yehuda says, this is in Shabbos, I think. These pots that are taken off the fire, and they're the kli rishon. The kli rishon that were on the fire, you took it off the fire, but it's still a kli rishon. And you can't put spices into them. Why? Because the kli rishon is mevashel. And the spices are going to get cooked when you put it in. But you can put the spices into a plate. That means that a klisheni. Or you can put it into tamchi is a soup serving bowl. If you want to bring the soup to the table, you put it in another bowl. I don't know what they're called. So, but it's not in the original soup pot from the fire. You put it into a fancy bowl. That's the tamchi. Rabbi Yehuda says, lakalu naisin. You can put it into any klisheni, chutz mi davar sheyesh b'chaimitz v'tzir, unless there's vinegar or brine that's sharp that's in there. Why? Because he holds that the brine or the vinegar makes it cook faster. So even though it's a klisheni, but klisheni together with chaimetz is a problem, because the chaimetz has that power to cause it to cook. So therefore, the opinion that holds that if you put chaimetz into the pot and then you put the flour in, that's going to make it cook very quickly, and there's going to be no issue of chametz. So where Rabbi Yehuda is machmer on Shabbos, he's mekel by Pesach because it cooks faster. The Gemara says, "V'nuk mikra Rabbi Yosi." Maybe it's really the opinion of Rabbi Yosi, the Tanan or the Tanya. Rabbi Yosi, I'm a shayrin b'chaimetz v'chaimetz tzimson. We said before that if it starts to burst when you're soaking barley, that you can. Rabbi Yosi said that you soak it in vinegar, and the vinegar is going to stop it from bursting. Maybe it's Rabbi Yosi's opinion. The Gemara says, "Kiyash minli the Rabbi Yosi." When did Rabbi Yosi say that? Hani mili di sabeni. That's only when it was in its pure state. Vinegar in its pure state. Avalai they taruvis light. But here the vinegar is mixing in. We don't know what Rabbi Yosi holds about vinegar mixed in. Over there, Rabbi Yehuda clearly says that vinegar mixed in causes the pot to become hot. Or I don't know, it's the heat. It causes the food to cook quicker. So, and that's what we're seeing, even though it's in a taruvis, even though it's in a mixture. Ula Amar, Ula says, Ula was the traveler, says, Echad zeh v'echad zeh aser. It's all aser. It's all aser to mix flour into a pot is aser. And even if you're going to add vinegar, whether you add it before or whether you add it after, it doesn't make a difference. Mishum lech amrinan nazira. You say, go away to the nazir. Schar, go around. Lakarma leisikra, don't go close to the vineyard. As you're getting way too close to the prohibitions. This is an expression that's used whenever we want to make a decree on something. We tell the nazir who's prohibited to drink wine, don't even walk through the vineyard. Walk around the vineyard. Rav Papa Sharile Bardiki are chefs. Rav Papa allowed the chefs or bakers, the Bei Reish Galusa of the house of the Reish Galusa, Lamamchi Kedera B'chasise. Lamamcha could mean to seal the pot with flour. And chasise is roasted flour, toasted or roasted flour. Amar Rava, Ika Deshari Ki Milsa Beduch the Shchichi Avdi. Rava says, is it possible that someone is permitting this in a place where there are slaves? Slaves have a bad reputation of being lazy. They don't get a salary, but they produce. So is anyone going to allow this in places where you have slaves? Because in the house of the Reish Galusa, there were slaves that were doing this. So he says, really, is this acceptable? They're not going to do a good job. They'll put it in, they won't. They're not going to do it carefully. Some say that Rava himself actually allowed this. Right, Rava himself actually did this. He sealed his pot. He used to seal the pot like a pressure cooker with dough. It would cook faster, or it would add heat. It wasn't really pressure, it would burst it. Okay. Insulation. Let's start the Mishnah. Charesis here is not the charesis that we have. I don't think. I think this charesis is some sort of dip that has vinegar in it. They would use it to put on to put it on meat. It would probably be some sort of sauce that they put on the meat to when they were roasting it or something. Yeah. So don't put flour into the charesis or into the mustard. And if you put it in, you eat it right away before it has a chance to become chametz. Eat it within 18 minutes, or maybe faster than that. Reb Meir says it's aser immediately. You don't know how quickly the chametz starts. This is sharp things that could start the process quickly. So we said before that chametz, that vinegar stops it. Here we're saying that it happens quickly. I don't know what the pshat is. The carbon pesach itself is not allowed to be cooked. Not in liquids and not in fruit juices. But you are allowed to smear liquid onto it while it's being roasted. And after it's roasted, you're allowed to eat it in a dip. You're allowed to dip it in. It's not considered that, you're cooking it because you dipped it into some sauce that you have on your plate. The baker has a pot of water that he uses to clean his things. That you have to pour out right away because that becomes chametz. Amar Rav Kana. Actually, you know what? Let's leave it so I don't rush through it. Yeah.